Hello, and welcome to another fully live episode of Hacking with Friends. My name is Kody KIlian. I'm a security researcher with Varonis, and today I'm joined by my good friend and fellow hacker, KIlian, who is here to help us talk about the hacker news of the week and also a little bit about cloud security. KIlian, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, great to be back again. I want to give a shout out to a couple people in the chat. Looks like it's raining and someone's disappointed in humanity. I feel that.
Already. Well, I mean, it's Friday, so give the weekend some time to change how you feel about that. But hello, 8-Bit Oni. Good to see you. Not in person this time, but still on the stream. And Repair Studio, SAQ, all wonderful to see. Yes, Heisenberg has returned. So if you notice, I have started a small-time art project. I've started dressing up the set a little bit, and I have some of the badges from some of my favorite conferences hanging up, but also some of the stickers from our sticker showdown, which hopefully I will be able to publish soon. It turns out that at conferences that strict, you really need to get releases from everyone. So that's okay. I didn't exactly like interview anyone like crazy, but we do have some very enthusiastic people at the like defense contractor booths and the Department of Defense booths that said some very nice things about some of these stickers. Like, oh, there it is. Can you see this one right there? Yeah, that was one of the coolest ones we got from the Department of Defense. But anyway, so some of my favorite stickers up here now. Hopefully you enjoy them. Feel free to give me some feedback on my new improvised set. But yeah, I'm putting things together as we go. So we've got a lot to talk about today in the news. And also we've got some stuff related to cloud security. So this week, I wanted to talk about a topic that is fundamental, right? So, how would I describe this? Okay. When I got started with learning about cloud security, one of the biggest things I didn't understand was the way that the infrastructure and everything else behind it works. In my head, like everything just kind of runs off of like, you know, like a server with like a big hard drive, and like you just rent that and then everything's good. So as soon as I started learning about cloud security, I learned that that is not the case. That's only the case for maybe a couple types of these models. But there's actually some really interesting stuff around here. And in order to understand how to get started hacking cloud security, you kind of need to understand something called the shared responsibility model and also how these services work. So, oh, great, it blanks out. I'm using my very favorite program, Keynote, which I'm sure everyone is a fan of. And here we go. Let me see if I can do this. Okay, so I was watching a bunch of videos on this the other night and kind of getting spread up on this. And I saw this AWS Shared Responsibility model. And this is like one of the things you have to understand if you are going to be working with AWS or cloud services, but it goes deeper than that. This is a concept that is kind of like deeply ingrained in cloud security, where the shared responsibility model means that, you know, the cloud provider is taking something off your hands, and in exchange, like you need to be aware of the boundary where your responsibility comes in. So in the AWS shared responsibility model, the customer is responsible for their data, their platform applications, identity, their access management, operating system, network, firewall, and configuration. All that stuff is the responsibility of the customer, whereas AWS is providing the compute, storage, database, and networking, regions, availability zones, and edge locations for all their infrastructure, and the security to keep all of that running. So the customer isn't running around worrying about whether or not AWS data centers are secure. Instead, they can focus on all the stuff up at the top. Now, that is actually just one shared responsibility model. It turns out that in cloud security, there's a lot of different boundaries where companies might be putting their information and might actually need to look out for security problems. So I wanted to just kind of talk about the various types of cloud infrastructure models, because I thought I knew a lot about this because I worked in technology before. I worked in software as a service, and I understand what that means on a marketing sense. But as like a back-end person, I really didn't understand what it meant. So when it comes to the different models of cloud infrastructure, the first one is infrastructure as a service. And this is basically AWS or like services like that, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud Platform. This is the kind of thing where you are, as the consumer of this service, basically responsible for almost everything. They offer hosting for all the stuff that you want to run, but the users have the application, the data, the runtime, and the operating system, whereas the cloud provider is basically managing virtualization, servers, storage, and networking. So in this model, it's like relatively cheap to use these services.
Right.
what you pay the cloud provider, but the cost is you have to basically protect the security of like the operating systems you're running, the applications, and everything all the way down to where the shared responsibility model stops and or rather shifts over to the cloud provider. So platform as a service is kind of the next step where you're letting the cloud provider take on a little bit more responsibility. So this is going to be things like Heroku is like one of the most popular platforms as a service for developing like web applications and deploying them. App Engine, Microsoft Azure App Services. This is for developing like APIs, microservices, and other things that developers need to deploy something relatively quickly. This could be, again, like a backend API or something else that needs to be spun up and maintained relatively quickly. So in this case, the users manage the applications of the data, but the provider is managing basically everything else. So everything the same as before, but also the runtime, the middleware, the OS, and the infrastructure, which they were previously managing, they all now take responsibility for patching that, keeping it updated, and applying like security updates to that underlying infrastructure. So yeah, I kind of made a little bit of a trade here. You're paying more, but you're getting things already up for you. And as a developer, you don't want to focus on, like managing the security of your, underlying operating systems and patching that. You just want to focus on your application. So that's really where this this kind of structure begins to be useful. All right, so last is software as a service. And this is where I've worked extensively before. And you would recognize this as like Gmail or Microsoft 365, Slack, a Google Workspace. Like this is the case where the provider is managing everything, applications, data, runtime, OS, and infrastructure. And instead, the user of the service is basically just working with the data or otherwise just interacting with it. So in that case, the provider manages everything, infrastructure, applications, data, runtime, OS, and security. And you can see that when you start to compare these, you can see that this is from Cyberplatter was my teacher for a lot of this. So I have to give her a shout out for like actually being very helpful in teaching me some of these cloud security concepts. But this is the shared responsibility broken down into where the boundary happens. And I think it's cool to kind of think about this green zone, ironically, is the danger zone. Green means danger, where like this is where like interesting things can happen because there's kind of a gap here where like it, there's maybe default settings left by the cloud provider that the cloud consumer is then left to decide how they want to do it. Like AWS does a default deny in this scenario, whereas infrastructure as a service, they're going to set everything to deny. And you need to go in and decide what parts of the infrastructure are going to be accessible via all this other stuff. But that is also where misconfigurations can cause a real problem. And you can kind of imagine this as like, if something happens down at the bottom, then things up at the top are probably going to be potentially impacted. Too. So I didn't realize how tied to the infrastructure model cloud security threats are. Depending on what type of model a business is using, that like opens up different opportunities for an attacker. So if you're a hacker just getting started with cloud security, understanding these different models is going to let you know what types of vulnerabilities are going to crop up and what types of things like AWS policy misconfigurations, or maybe something on a platform as a service like a Heroku misconfiguration, what types of vulnerabilities and opportunities that opens up for an attacker. And of course, for a defender, what types of things you're really going to need to keep an eye on to make sure that there's not unintentional leaking of data or potentially allowing attackers inside your network to access too much. So if one of them is compromised, then a lot of stuff can get leaked. So that's my little presentation on cloud infrastructure. I, again, didn't know most of this stuff, amazingly, even though I worked in this field for quite some time. So I have to say, like, for me to have been working in this area that long and not know some of the fundamentals of cloud security was, I guess, startling. But then again, I never really worked with that. I worked with Wi-Fi, hardware, gadgets, that sort of thing. So I think that understanding how the underlying services I'm interacting with are actually set up and where they might be vulnerable and where as a hacker I should start poking around, that's pretty fundamental. So hopefully that taught some people some things about cloud security infrastructure. KIlian, you know a lot. I feel like a lot more about this. Did I miss anything really critical you think for beginners to understand?
No, I think that was a great outline. The interesting thing, at least for me, is for whatever reason in my career, I've only ever worked in IaaS or SaaS, but I've never worked in platform as a service for any reason. So it was interesting to see kind of how that sits between them, because it's one of those things when you explained it here, my brain goes, oh yeah, that makes total sense. But then like as soon as the stream is over, I'm going to forget about it because it's not somewhere I spend my time. The other thing too, I think that I'll just really hammer on is with the shared responsibility model, in all cases, it doesn't matter what you're using, IaaS, PaaS, or SaaS, or anything else, the data is always the business's or whoever's responsibility. It will not be the responsibility of the platform provider. And that's a thing that I think gets missed a lot. We talk about some like risk transference when we're going to use the SaaS service, something like that, where, yeah, you can absolutely offload the maintenance of the servers and the patching and whatever else there. Get that off your plate, get off your IT plate, your security team's plate. But I think a lot of times, and hopefully this is changing, but talking to organizations, they think that transfers the risk of protecting the data, and it doesn't, and it never will. And that's a thing that I think we need to be really mindful of the more we adopt it, is whatever the default configurations are, they try and do a pretty good job, at least from what I've seen, but it's still your responsibility. You can't leave that bucket open. You have to know what's in there. You have to know what the exposure level is. Just because it's not your NetApp or whatever it is sharing the data doesn't mean that you're not responsible if something goes wrong.
Yeah, and the different levels of kind of providing services that cloud providers offer, like even if you go to that max level, it's still, you're right, it's your responsibility to take care of the data. And as a business, that means that you're always going to be keeping an eye on that data in order to make sure that it doesn't get stolen, because it's the one thing in all these models that's the customer's responsibility, and certainly could be vulnerable to misconfigurations or other problems that are not handled by the cloud security provider.
The other thing while you're setting up is Repair Studio. Yes, I too have fallen victim to turning on an Amazon service and forgetting to turn it off forever, and then wondering why I'm getting bills in the mail. So, welcome to the club.
Yeah, it seems like your house is going to get turned into the next Amazon work from home space.
You're right.
Yeah, I one time created a chatbot according to a tutorial, and they're just like, just put in your credit card, they'll never charge it. And then eventually I went back, unfortunately that credit card was like canceled or I lost it or something, but I logged into the account, and the chatbot had been active on Twitter for like 4 years, just like replying to people and like causing like chaos, and it had said some like controversial stuff, and I was like, oh my god, but the bill was, I had to contact them to resolve that. But yeah, the 8-Bit Oni also says there should be Temple as a service, so it's spinning up an instance of Temple's Temple OS on demand. Yeah, no, that I think would be absolutely something that there's some demand in the hacker community for. All right, so let's talk about the news of the week. We've got a lot of stuff to cover, and some of it is pretty crazy. I'm running the show today, so let me pull this back up. And there we go. All right, so first thing, I like to cover different tools. This one was cool. So we've talked about like living off the land and using like bringing vulnerable drivers. This doesn't even need to bring a vulnerable driver. It just downgrades whatever drivers are around it. This is true living off the land in a way that I think is really cool. Windows Downdate, which I guess is the opposite of upgrade, allows for downgrade attacks that introduce old vulnerabilities. So sometimes it's easier to just downgrade something that's been found to be vulnerable than it is to introduce like a malicious driver or something that might be recognized. So known vulnerable drivers or known vulnerable software is a great way of being able to break into a system. And if you don't find any there, then this is a tool that can just introduce it by finding things that will allow you to downgrade and bypassing some of the defenses that are built into Windows in order to do it. I have not tried this, but it certainly looks like probably one of the most interesting tools I've seen released in a while.
If anything, I read that this is the most terrifying thing I think I've seen in a really, really long time. Just, hey, the machine is going to look like it's updated, fully patched and everything else, so it means nothing anymore if they can just selectively downgrade whatever the security is and do whatever they want. And I believe the article mentioned that there's like no way to fix this currently, I think. So this is
currently one of the 2 vulnerabilities it relies on remains completely unpatched.
Yeah, this is the most interesting and most scary thing I've seen in a long time. Like, this is cool. I mean, it's awesome, but boy, oof, no.
Yeah, so if you're a Windows hacker, this is probably something you're going to want to test, maybe in like a virtual machine or something like that. being able to take a fully updated system and slowly downgrade it in various ways that are not defended against is a perfect way of being able to penetrate deeper into the machine, be able to elevate your credentials and start doing all sorts of nefarious stuff. So this is something definitely worth checking out if you're interested in Windows hacking tools.
Kody, is it your 5-year anniversary or something? Funky Monk says congratulations.
Yeah. So 5 years at Varonis as of the last stream.
Wow.
We ruminated on like the first episodes and filmed them and went over them and edited them for another, I think, couple of months before the very first episode on securityfwd went live. But we had other episodes that were like sponsored by Varonis that went live on other platforms. So I consider that to be the 5-year anniversary of the inception of the securityfwd channel. So we had a little anniversary stream where we went over some of the best moments, talked about some of the first videos we ever did and some of the pivots we did, where we started out making videos very similar to Nullbyte, but even juicier. And then over time, through COVID and other things, pivoted to live streaming and doing live events. So yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I guess that makes sense, but it just doesn't feel like that long.
I know. That's what's crazy to me is like, I felt like, oh, like 3.5 years are coming up. And I look, it's like 5 years. Like, are you kidding? It's crazy. All right. So this was my least favorite story of the week. So in this case, the city of Columbus, Ohio said that in a data breach, no personal information was exposed. And then they went on to say that the data that had been leaked on the darknet had been judged to be unusable because it was corrupted and could not be recovered. A security researcher, David Leroy Ross, aka Connor Goodwolf, went ahead and downloaded that information, which did not require a great amount of sophistication to do, and shared it with media to underscore the point that, in fact, very sensitive information was included. This was details of domestic violence reports, police officers, like personal information, basically the kind of information you don't want on the darknet. Now, this information is indisputably sitting on the darknet, and obviously the people affected by it really want to know whether or not they've truly been exposed. And in this case, it seems like the security researcher here proved without a doubt that the city was making false statements about whether or not these victims should expect their data to be freely available. Now, they're claiming that this required like very special technical knowledge in order to pull off, and that it's not trying to suppress free speech. But I cannot say strongly enough that this is absolutely a case where a city dealing with a ransomware attack impacting many people in sensitive positions seems to potentially, have made some statements that conflict with what the facts are. And now that they're going after the security researcher who has discovered that that data is in fact available for anybody who's able to access Tor to download, most people know how to do that now. It's not that hard. And if you don't know how to do it, you can just pop on over to the website, which has a great tutorial and will get you set up in minutes. So the thought that this requires some sort of like nefarious special hacker wizard power is completely unfounded here. And the city going after somebody who basically proved them wrong when they were talking about sensitive information of like, again, like police officers and like crime victims, that to me is not a good look. Like, it doesn't look like the city is spending its time and energy on like, trying to address the issue at hand and try to like help the victims of this like data breach. Instead, they're going after a researcher who made them look bad in the press. So we'll see exactly how that pans out. This is attracting some legal attention, and obviously a lot of other security researchers are upset here, especially when the data at hand is not data that is, the city's data. Exactly, it is the shared data of the people who they are processing it for. So, in the case of people being impacted by that and not getting accurate information, I'm just I'm a little leery of this. It makes me a little bit more hesitant as a researcher to present my findings if like an organization that looks bad because of it is willing to sue me, even when the victims are not being helped in any way, shape, or form, as far as I can see, in doing so.
Yeah, when I read this, man, my eyes almost rolled out of my head and across the floor. Like, oh no, it's totally fine.
I physically couldn't watch this entire press conference talking about how like this is totally fine. The researcher has these crazy cyber skills that like, I just couldn't do it. So
you know what? It doesn't hold water because the ransomware affiliates can teach grandma how to go get Bitcoin off and like make payments on the dark web, like in a simple thing. Like, man.
Yeah.
It's just the whole thing just kind of upsets me.
Yeah, pretty crazy.
Not cool.
Yeah, and we've seen this sort of thing before. There was an incident of like a courthouse being catching a pen tester and then going after them, and some other stuff involving like cities going after researchers. But I have seen this sort of thing before. Typically, it's not substantiated, but
right,
it absolutely is the riskiest part of a security researcher's job, is potentially getting sued by an organization that's unhappy with the results of your research. All right, so we've got a wave of European privacy laws finally beginning to actually, these are more laws of encryption. Let me reframe that. So a wave of European encryption-focused laws actually beginning to cause some controversy when they ensnare the heads of major platforms. So in this case, Telegram CEO being arrested on charges of allowing crime to happen on the platform. So this is after some precedents were kind of set with the prosecution of some of these like illegal, like encrypted phone things that were specifically marketed to criminals. These were a honeypot operation in many cases, or taken over by police organizations designed to lure people into committing crimes on these supposedly encrypted phones, which were actually backdoored and would deliver the contents of the conversations directly to the police. Now, prosecuting the CEOs of this company, where it was a little bit difficult at first, it seems like the groundwork has been laid to go after CEOs of organizations that are found to be leveraging encryption to facilitate crime knowingly, or in some cases, maybe unknowingly. Now, in this case, it looks like these legal proceedings were brought because Telegram was ignoring a number of legal requests from France. And there was also an interesting follow-up story on the cybercrime unit that is attempting to go after these platforms and why they are accelerating this kind of hunt for operators of encrypted messaging platforms or other encrypted platforms in general. So this is kind of a warning shot towards Signal, I think was mentioned here. So I think that, yes, it is clear that France is pursuing encrypted messaging providers. Other operators such apps such as Signal should be concerned about whether or not they are in compliance with French regulations, because the message is clear: if they are not, legal action will take place. So this seems like a not very veiled threat that potentially other encrypted platforms that are designed to ensure freedom of speech and ensure that people in potentially like repressive regimes or other places where it's not possible for them to speak out or communicate are able to communicate with each other. So if the European Union and France are going to start passing laws that are specifically targeting these platforms, it's going to be very difficult for these platforms to have any of their employees travel potentially in the European Union if they're going to get arrested.
The interesting thing about this is, I mean, that platform was notorious for facilitating a lot of criminal actions. So I wouldn't say that this is completely baseless as a outside sort of observer, ignoring some of the requests for, known criminal activity and for takedowns and things like that. I also kind of, I don't know how to say this otherwise, but kind of looking at the state of the industry, the kind of lack of data protection, especially in the US, seeing one of these executives get at least temporarily arrested kind of makes me feel a little bit good. Maybe that's terrible. Maybe that's some like Schadenfreude, or I don't know, but we need to take some of this stuff seriously. Known criminal activity takes place there. It's very common. It's not like it's a secret. So there is a balance, but the overarching stipulation that they're coming after all encrypted messaging platforms that's overreach. I mean, that's plain and simple overreach, but that's a different thing. Breaking encryption, trying to unmask that versus we have a tactical approach. We know that cyber criminals are using this in these places, terrorists and other things. Like, you have to moderate the platform to some degree. Like, it stops being a freedom of speech issue, I think, at that point. That's my hot take. Maybe it's not a hot take. Who knows?
Math is hard.
Right.
Yeah, my position is always like, if you try to regulate encryption and the
Right.
math makes it so that like backdooring it or changing it like fundamentally breaks it, then it's really difficult to use that technology the way it's supposed to be used if you're also trying to like neuter the potential for like conversations that just can't be intercepted because of the
right.
Like I feel like on the back end they're just like, let's just get this quantum stuff up and running, and then it just doesn't work anymore. But you know,
I think
that's why there's a big boom in like quantum resistant algorithms, and why some people are starting to really care about that, because nation states are starting to be maybe a little quieter on the whole encrypted thing. Maybe because in certain circumstances they do have the ability to break encryption that normally wouldn't be possible, but I don't really know.
And I think that's for me my dividing line is, you're like, don't attack the algorithm. The algorithm is good for everybody. In this particular case, it's not the encrypted message. I think that's the problem from my mind. It's the fact that it's much more of a social media platform than a like point-to-point communication.
That's true.
And again, the lines get fuzzy there. Don't attack the algorithm. The algorithm's doing exactly what it's supposed to, protecting the data transfer and the communications, which I support. It's the fact that it's more than that, and we're getting into like content moderation versus private messaging. So again, fuzzy lines, but no, don't attack the algorithm. Encryption's our friend.
All right, I've got 2 QR code stories in a row.
Okay.
So people are always curious about how QR codes are used in crime. Well, one of these stories is a Microsoft Sway abuse. And this is interesting because QR codes are frequently used to make people use their mobile device to attempt to do something that gives a cyber criminal access to an environment. And this is because endpoint devices, especially like smartphones, typically have fewer protections. And they are a great way of potentially getting somebody to give up their Microsoft credentials. So in this case, it was an attack trying to get people to give up their Microsoft 365 credentials. And a lot of this was hosted using Microsoft's Sway. So this is supposed to be for creating online presentations, but it actually was hosting landing pages to trick users into handing over their credentials. And this was a very clever attack because they were using Microsoft's own infrastructure to host the QR code attacks. So the idea here is that they would send these malicious QR codes to victims, they would scan them, and then they would use a Microsoft related domain to provide everything else needed to attack them. Now, that is clever because most people don't know what Sway is. And if they just see cloud.microsoft, they assume, oh, it's some random Microsoft service I've never heard of. So for a QR code attack, hosting everything behind this clever use of Microsoft's own infrastructure is very living off the land and probably quite effective. Second one up is Redondo Beach warning of fake QR codes on parking meters. So what I love about this story is that they showed the QR codes unredacted. So I just scanned them and I got the URL. I'll let this play. So yeah, here we go. So this is it. So they show the whole QR code here. And if you don't want to scan this, I did it already. And I tried to look it up on archive.org, but it looks like it wasn't able to totally get it. So just so you can see it, that is poibyphone.online. I'm not totally sure what the original URL was, but it was probably maybe paybyphone.org or something.
Yeah.
But either way, .online is like clearly one of those like very low cost domains that you can buy very easily. So somebody went around and slapped this on over 150 different meters. And they were basically able to trick people into paying. Oh yeah, here's the mobile version of the website. I actually want to see that a little bit better. Oh yeah, so looks like they spun up a little like web application here, and poibyphone.online was providing this interface that allowed people to put in their credit card information. So that's pretty wild to me because I see these QR codes all the time. I'm like, I should replace that. That. And I always think like, what funny thing could I replace that with? And now somebody has picked a decisively unfunny thing to replace it with. Now, a lot of people just go to the front, pay directly at the station. I always feel weird scanning a QR code to pay. Like it just feels strange to me. But gas stations, like these convenience sites, like anywhere that's providing you with the place to put your credit card is a potential spot where people could attack. So be on the lookout. QR codes are not necessarily your friend.
It's funny. I just think yesterday somebody sent me a video of I think it was somebody in California. They're at the beach, whatever. Old guy had a QR code in the back of his shirt, and they scanned it in the video, and it had a little naughty message that popped up. So it was, I found it pretty funny.
Yeah, I saw when I was at DEF CON, I just saw a shirt that said, "You can trust me," and a giant QR code. I'm like, I'm not scanning that. I'm not doing it. Something bad will happen. All right, so this story is interesting. I actually hadn't heard too much about the experience of going through an airport that is currently under cyber attack, but look forward to this in the future because it seems like airports are a favorite target of these ransomware groups because it causes a lot of disruption. So in this case, it was not a catastrophe, but it was something that caused increased frustration and inconvenience. If you think about it, each one of the airlines has their own system, and there are federally mandated systems that are much more secure, that are separated from the systems at the airport. But when the airport gets attacked, it means a couple things. One, the airlines cannot communicate with each other through the airport system. That means rebooking people, involving other airlines for anything becomes a real headache, and there is no way for airports to exchange information, or airlines to exchange information with each other throughout the airport. There's also, in this case anyway, no ability to put information on the screen for where your gate is. So most of the information services that let people know where they're going were taken offline. Now, again, this isn't necessarily impacting flights too much because the airlines are able to continue to operate. But when the actual airport is down, it becomes a real problem. So also it seemed like luggage, other check-in areas were shut down and not able to be used. Yeah, if you're looking for examples of what a cyber attack looks like on an airport, the Seattle airport is apparently a example of that right now. When you see some pictures of of just printed out signs that are just like taped to displays that have been taken down in the attack. And again, this is not necessarily like shutting down flights, like planes have not been grounded here. It is merely making a lot of work and frustration for people traveling through this airport, and probably causing problems with changing flights and doing other more advanced tasks. So if you want to kind of hear the report of what it's like to go through an airport that is shut down or has shut down some of its services due to a cyber attack, it must be kind of a bizarre futurely experience to see an infrastructure hub taken out partially by cyber criminals.
You know what I want back? Maybe I'm showing my age, but remember those old flipboards we used to have with things? I want those back. I think they're all gone now. I haven't seen one in years.
I see them at conferences sometimes because people have nostalgia, but yeah, I think most of them are gone. All right, so wanted to shout out that a deepfake group is now making a lot of money, and if you've seen these, then you know how frustrating they are. You'll be scrolling or looking on social media, and suddenly you'll see a deepfake talking about crypto. I've seen multiple of these myself, and this is an example of an Elon Musk-based crypto scam. It is apparently really easy to spin these up, and these AI specialists who make convincing deepfakes have been monetizing this, apparently based out of the Netherlands. So interesting to see a section of the cybercrime industry has shifted over to AI deepfake experts as people who are able to convince large amounts of crypto holders to invest their money in these crypto scams that are supposedly backed by people who they know or respect or otherwise will listen to. All right, running through a couple. So FBI is talking about ransomware, Ransom Hub breaching 210 victims since February. That is a ton. Although there is some dispute in some cases about whether or not these victims were actually breached or if they negotiated behind the scenes. But that is a tremendous amount of victims for any particular group to amass. And a lot of these affect critical infrastructure. So when I talked to those good folks at Rewards for Justice over at DEF CON who were talking about putting out rewards for information on hackers who are attacking critical infrastructure, this is kind of exactly what they were talking about. Let's see. All right, so we've got some other great stories I want to talk about. So this was a case of end-of-life devices being attacked and a very easy exploit allowing hackers to infiltrate end-of-life IP cameras. A lot of people continue to use these, and I guess they were just built too good. But unfortunately, they do not have the software support to be secure anymore, and as a result, changing the brightness in a certain way allows you to unauthenticatedly inject commands over the network using these specially crafted requests. So pretty easy attack, lots of devices still vulnerable, and very interesting. So this is kind of a worst case scenario. We talked about how spyware vendors or mercenary software vendors will develop these really expensive exploits, and they will use them for whoever pays for them. Now, seems like Russian-aligned cyber criminals have been then stealing these exploits and using them for Russian state-backed activities. So we're seeing a direct impact of these kind of like privately developed zero-day vulnerabilities being then stolen by state-based actors and used for their own campaigns. This is just an interesting C2 concept. I've heard of it before, but a type of malware is using Google Sheets to store information. So we're looking for all this like data exfiltration, and we're trying so hard to like find, you know, somebody uploading files. But in some cases, just entering data into Google Sheets is an activity that in a business that uses Google probably isn't going to be noticed. So this was one of the more interesting stories in that they found a clever and interesting C2 server that allows them to sneakily kind of exfiltrate information in a way that is perfectly legitimate under most business processes. Now, they were impersonating tax authorities, and they were attempting to get people to allow access to this and then exfiltrate information and control the implant that they installed via Google Sheets. Now, this is also nice because productivity tools are increasingly used to facilitate attacks because they are tuned for convenience, not security. So if you have something that's designed for a lot of people to be able to access it and update it in real time, then that actually makes a perfect C2 server.
Yeah, pretty clever. I like that one.
All right. So this is another example of cyber criminals working with state actors. So in this case, Iranian hackers were working with and strategizing with ransomware gangs to attack and breach defense, education, finance, and healthcare organizations in the United States because that's a mutual goal. So apparently, the Iranians have the goal of just attacking these organizations in general, and the ransomware actors have the goal of extracting as much money as possible from the situation. So strategizing and working together is kind of, I guess, a natural conclusion in the cybercrime world. The Iranian-backed national groups that have significant resources being able to help out cyber criminals and the cyber criminals with their untraceable and well-known infrastructure is something that kind of is the perfect team for extracting as much information as possible and hopefully money as possible from these organizations they're trying to attack. So yeah, I mean, this makes sense to me, and I can see why an organization who's trying to attack businesses in the United States would try to work with criminal groups to hide their activities and make it so they have a better chance at getting a payout. All right, almost through them. Kilian, I have terrible news. Our precious dicks are under attack. Across the country, dicks have shut down their email, locked employees out after a cyber attack has made it so that internal store systems are having a difficult time of working. In spite of that, it seems like dicks across the country are still open, but it is certainly a concerning situation. Now, again, this, I believe it's the K8 filing with the Security and Exchange. The 8K. Kind of forces companies in the public that are publicly traded to talk about what exactly is going on. In this case, we can see that it is a short K8K statement. It is talking about, in this case, third-party access to its information systems, including portions of its systems containing certain confidential information. They activated its cybersecurity response plan, engaged its external cybersecurity expert to investigate, isolate, and contain the threat. Has also notified federal law enforcement. So again, these are becoming kind of like cookie cutter, and like I find that these like are kind of like they're finding ways to give away less and less information, but definitely worth noting that there's all sorts of businesses that come under attack, and in this case, a nationwide attack on dicks, which is very unfortunate. I guess we'll see if anything comes of this, but again, this is not actually impacting customers' ability to walk into a store and purchase something. So it's a little bit less pain than a full store-wide shutdown. But stores are finding that their phone lines are down and other internal services are down. So we'll see exactly what the impact is on this and whether or not they decide to pay the ransom.
So just to clarify quickly, the balls are still available at Dick's, right?
Yes, you can still go into a Dick's and buy whatever you want, sporting goods, balls, whatever you want to buy there, they will have it. And you'll be able to check out and buy it, but you won't be able to call ahead and make sure that the balls are in the store. That's the problem.
That's what I wanted to know. Okay, so the balls are safe at least.
Yes, you can. Access has been facilitated and assured.
Excellent.
All right. Next up, we have the U.S. Marshal Service is disputing a ransomware gang's breach claims in this case, it looked very spicy. And I think we reported on this. Hunters International was talking about the breach and listing it on their portal. But this data also matched a breach from last year that was put up for sale. So it could be the same information. And just that threat actor is now associated with this new group. Kind of hard to tell with the behind the scenes mergers. And then we also have a case of Pigeon Messenger having their official plugin repo being infiltrated with closed source third-party software that was actually used to install keyloggers, information stealers, and malware, commonly used to gain access to corporate networks. So this is the kind of thing that a initial access broker would want to distribute as widely as possible so they could turn around and sell that access to a ransomware gang. So it claims to be implementing off-the-record protocol available for Windows and Linux, but unfortunately it was actually infecting users with Darkgate malware. So it is something that has been switched over to an open source only license. And now if you want to actually create a plugin for this, it has to follow a certain open source standard. And I think that's just about it. Do we have one more? Oh, no, that's it. All right, that's all the news for the week. We went through it. So that is all we've got this week. Lots of great questions. And again, thank you all for your concern about the sporting goods company. I see there's a lot of comments in the chat voicing your concern and support for Dick's. So I certainly hope that that situation is resolved soon, that they are able to restore everything and that you're able to call your local Dick's without having them unable to pick up the phone. So very sad situation, but there was some crazy news this week, and hopefully my little presentation on cloud infrastructure was helpful for people who are just getting started with cloud security and may not understand how the underlying setup and what the cloud provider is selling to the company really does impact where the security vulnerabilities might be. But as Kilian pointed out, in all instances of those, the data is the responsibility of the customer. So if you're looking at cloud security, looking at the data is certainly going to be something that affects every single one of these cloud models. All right, everyone. So I literally cannot with the comments that are there right now. So I'm just going to through. If you want to support the stream, you can always go to varonis.com/Kody. That's KODY. And it lets everyone here at Varonis know you appreciate the stream, you wanted to keep going, and it doesn't cost you anything. We will see you again next week on Wednesday and Friday to talk about the hacking news and also answer your questions I wasn't able to, or in some cases willing to answer on this stream. So thank you to everyone who hung out with us today. We'll see you soon, and goodbye, everyone.
Take care.